Voices of Change. A family's struggle for racial equality. The sun was setting on the small suburban neighborhood. The sky turned orange as the Williams family pulled up to their house, a modest two-story home surrounded by neat lawns and white picket fences. As they stepped out of the car, the sounds of children laughing and playing echoed through the air, but there was an unspoken tension in the Williams family. They were used to being the only family of color in a predominantly white neighborhood. Ella Williams, a teacher at the local middle school, glanced over at her husband, James, who was locking the car. Their son, Kai, a 16-year-old with a sharp wit and a rebellious streak, walked up the driveway with his younger sister, Leah, who was 10, and usually quiet but observant beyond her years. "Mom, why don't they ever let me play with the other kids?" Leah asked, her face clouded with confusion. Ella paused for a moment, her heart heavy. She didn't want to explain the harsh realities of racism to her young daughter, but she knew it was inevitable. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "sometimes people don't understand things that are different from what they know. But you have to know that who you are is beautiful, and you should never feel like you don't belong." Kai, overhearing the conversation, chimed in. "Mom, I don't think they'll ever get it. It's like we're invisible here. I can't even get a group to work with me in class without them treating me like I'm the problem." Ella sighed. The reality was harsh. Even after years of living in this neighborhood, the Williams family had always been treated like outsiders. It wasn't always overt, but subtle racism was everywhere. James, a mechanic who worked hard to provide for his family, had faced his own battles at work, being overlooked for promotions, blamed for mistakes he didn't make, and spoken to as if he were less capable simply because of the color of his skin. That evening, the Williams family sat around their dining table. The warm glow of the kitchen light cast long shadows on the walls. The children were unusually quiet as they picked at their food. "We can't just sit here anymore," Kai said, breaking the silence. "Something needs to change. This has to stop." Ella looked at her son. He was frustrated, and she could feel the same anger burning inside her. She nodded, setting her fork down. "You're right. But we need to do this the right way. We need to make our voices heard." James was quiet, unsure. "Ella, you know how people here are. We've tried to keep our heads down, make it work. I don't know if we can change them." Ella reached over and held his hand. "Sometimes you have to speak up, even when you're scared." After a long pause, James sighed. "All right, let's do it. Let's make a difference." In the weeks that followed, the Williams family began their mission to change the community's perception. They started by talking to neighbors, inviting people to join them for community events, and hosting small gatherings to talk about racism and its effects. The road wasn't easy. Many people were receptive, but others were dismissive or worse, openly hostile. At one of the PTA meetings, Ella found herself facing an uncomfortable situation. A parent, a woman she had known for years, casually made a joke about her race. Ella froze, her face burning, but she didn't say anything. She felt trapped in her silence. It was a reminder that even in spaces where she expected support, racism was lurking just below the surface. Meanwhile, Kai was fighting his own battles. At school, he faced exclusion from group projects, even though he was more than capable of contributing. One day, he overheard a group of classmates making fun of him for being different, and it stung. His pain was palpable, but he kept it inside, not wanting to show weakness. He knew if he spoke up, he would be labeled as too sensitive or overreacting. Leah, too, was affected. One afternoon, she came home from playing outside with tears in her eyes. "Mom, they won't let me play with them anymore," she said through sobs. "Because my skin is dark." Ella's heart shattered as she pulled her daughter into her arms. She had hoped to shield Leah from this cruelty for as long as possible, but there was no escaping the harshness of the world. "This is what we have to change," Ella said, wiping away Leah's tears. "People need to understand that racism is not okay." With renewed determination, the Williams family began planning a community event. They called it Diversity Day, a celebration of cultures, backgrounds, and voices that would bring their neighbors together to discuss race and inclusion. They believed that the more the community interacted, the more they could foster understanding and compassion. Ella reached out to other families in the area, while James worked on setting up the logistics. Kai helped design flyers, making sure to include a message about the importance of empathy and the power of standing together. Leah, despite her earlier heartbreak, was excited to help too, suggesting they offer a space for kids to draw and share their dreams of a world where everyone was treated equally. Despite their best efforts, they met resistance. Some neighbors didn't understand why they were putting so much effort into the event, thinking it would only divide the community further. There were whispers of protests, and some people even tore down flyers, leaving the Williams family discouraged. But the Williams didn't give up. They stood strong, even as they received hateful comments and passive-aggressive stares. Their resolve only grew stronger because they knew they were doing the right thing. They also began reaching out to community leaders, teachers, and other local organizations, garnering support and slowly shifting the narrative in their favor. The day of the Diversity Day event arrived. It was a sunny Saturday, and the Williams family had done their best to create a welcoming environment. The local park was set up with tents for food, cultural performances, and art displays. Families arrived slowly at first, cautiously observing one another. But as the day progressed, the atmosphere began to shift. More families of all races and backgrounds gathered around the food tables, sharing dishes from their cultures. Children played games, and adults exchanged stories, realizing they had more in common than they had thought. Kai and his friends performed a spoken-word piece about racial injustice, while Leah handed out homemade cards that encouraged people to celebrate diversity. Ella gave a heartfelt speech, talking about her experiences as a mother and a teacher, explaining how painful it was to see her children struggle with being treated differently. "Sometimes," she said, "it feels like we're invisible. But that's why we have to stand up and we have to be seen. It's not just about us, it's about all of us. We all deserve a world where we are treated with dignity and respect." As Ella spoke, Kai stood beside her and Leah held her hand. The crowd was listening. It wasn't just the Williams family talking now, it was everyone. A neighbor who had initially been one of the event's most vocal critics stood up and said, "I was wrong. I didn't understand before, but now I see. We all need to do better." By the end of the event, the park was filled with laughter and conversations. People who had once been divided by prejudice were now standing side by side, learning from one another. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The Williams family felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that they had sparked change in their community. A local news station covered the event, broadcasting how the neighborhood had come together to embrace diversity. The story of the Williams family's efforts spread throughout the town, and soon, other neighborhoods began organizing similar events. It became a ripple effect of understanding, and the Williams family felt proud to have been the catalysts for that change. In the weeks that followed, James sat down with a neighbor who had once dismissed their efforts. The neighbor shared how his children had attended Diversity Day and, for the first time, talked openly about race. "I've learned more from that event than I ever thought possible," the neighbor admitted. James smiled, feeling a shift in his own heart. Sometimes change comes in small ways. It's not easy, but it's worth it. The Williams family continued to face challenges, but they no longer felt alone. They were part of a movement. Small at first but growing bigger every day. Kai began speaking out more at school, and Leah, with her newfound confidence, even helped lead a group project on diversity. Together, they were proving that one family's courage could lead to powerful, lasting change. The camera zooms out on the Williams family, sitting together on their porch, looking out over the neighborhood. There's peace in their hearts now. The sun is setting once more, but this time it feels like a new beginning. The narrator's voice echoes softly. "It wasn't easy. Never is. But when the Williams family decided to stand up for what was right, they didn't just change their community. They changed themselves, and in doing so, they gave others the courage to find their own voices. True change starts with the bravery to speak up." A message appears on the screen. Racism doesn't change overnight, but small acts of courage can create ripples of change. Speak out, stand up, and make your voice heard. Resources for local anti-racism organizations, educational materials, and ways to get involved appear as the video fades to black.